Hi again, Josh Kahr here, and we're recording volume 2 of Kahr's Challenge Cases. So, as I talked about earlier, I basically put this case study set together because I did a set of 12 cases back in 2020, and there seems to be a lot of demand for these things. So, I'm doing another 12, and I'm doing them right, and I'm doing with detail, and I'm having a lot of fun with it. So, with that very quick intro out of the way, let's get into it. The first one in the set is Teetering Towers. This is basically an apartment deal. It's an acquisition. We're going to do some sort of equity structure on the thing. We're going to do some repositioning. That's the idea. So, as I always like to do this, we start by getting basically the raw data in there. Once we've got the raw data in, we're going to do an unlevered cash flow. Then we're going to do a levered cash flow. Then we're going to do some equity structure type stuff. And that's pretty much the idea. As with all my cases, I try to use a case that was a real exam that was given to incoming analysts and associates. If I discover any typos or screw ups in the document, I'll fix them as I go along. But yeah, so let's get on to it. Teetering Towers, RRK, a prestigious private equity firm, is looking to acquire an existing apartment complex called Summit Towers. They're going to buy it for $220 million. They're going to lease it up. They're going to refinance it. They're going to sell it. In this case, it's going to be all equity at the initial purchase, which, whether or not that's realistic or not, that's what we're doing. We've got some different square footages in here, it looks like. One for gross, one for net. There's some operating expense information. There's going to be some lease up. I assume that's to lease up the vacant space. At some point, we're going to refinance the thing. There's some information about the financing terms. Then we're going to sell it off, it looks like. And then finally, there's some partnership modeling type stuff. Now, I've not built this before, so I'm sort of doing it as we do it. Sometimes I get commentary from people about how I'm not doing it perfectly. Well, that's what happens when you do it from scratch. So sorry if I'm not perfect in my approach. I will spend some time, though, on the end of it to try to clean up the work because, again, it's good to clean stuff up, and that's the idea. Looks like we also have some special instructions here. It says, if there are any additional assumptions, please identify them. That seems to be a way that people put this in documents like this. It's often like a free pass. It's someone basically saying, hey, if what I did is garbage, don't blame me, and make adjustments, basically. And we need to build the model from scratch. I really try whenever I'm doing these to build them from scratch because I feel that's the most realistic way of showing how you would actually work through it. So I'm just using a copy of Excel, a Word doc, and I'm doing the first one again, Teetering Towers, which is multifamily. Okay. So let's get some basic information in here. What do we have for information? Well, before I even get started, I know I'm going to have some worksheets here. So I'm going to define my worksheets. I'm going to have a worksheet that's going to be my inputs page, because I'm definitely going to have that. I'm going to have some sort of cash flow page. I'm probably going to need some sort of amortization schedule because there's some debt on this thing. And I'm probably going to have a page called equity structure. Now, one other thing you could do, which sometimes I do, is I could also probably throw in an executive summary, because if I've got an inputs page, and I'm doing all this math, at some point I'm going to want to make a page to explain what is going on for presentation purposes. While I try not to make things ugly as I work, if I'm going to spend any time making things pretty, it's going to be the executive summary page. That's kind of the whole point of the thing. So, yeah, that's the idea. So with that said, let me get into this and, kind of take it from there. And also well, yeah, I'll just start with the inputs page. So what are the inputs? Well, I'm just reading off the list, basically. We've got a few things. We've got a purchase price, and let me make this bigger so everyone can see it. We got a purchase price that's going to be $220. Cool. Easy enough. It's a 10-year hold. It doesn't look like it needs the hold here to be flexible, so I'm not going to put in the hold period as an input. I could make it flexible, but it's not asking for that here. So here I'm not going to worry about that as an input. That's an important thing when you build these models. When you're trying to figure out what's an input and what's variable, look at the questions that are being asked. In here, they're asking questions like, let's sell it off at some point in the future, like sell it in year 10, but they're not saying things like make the sale date variable. Okay, so I'm not going to worry about that. We have a unit count. That probably will be useful, which is 400 units. For square footage, we've got a GSF and an NSF of 500,000 feet and 400,000 feet. There's what you build and there's what you can lease or sell, right? In apartments, people don't live in your hallways, right? So what you're renting or selling in an apartment building is not the same as what you're building. It depends on the building, but there's usually about a 10 to 15% bleed from what you build and what you rent or sell. I realize with office buildings, people talk about net rentable area differently, but at least in the apartment sector, again, you're usually bleeding some percentage. 20% is high, but that's what it's been modeled here, so that's what I'm using. And it says here each unit's 1,000 feet, which I guess makes sense because 400,000 feet. Pardon me. I could just do like NSF per unit. I can actually just do some very basic division there. Sweet. Okay, again, not that exciting. But, I'm working through it. We're going to have a current occupancy of 67%, which means just being really stupid about it. It sounds like we're starting at 268 units. Yep, and that's exact. So 268 units. Awesome. What else do we have here? We have an OpEx of 3.5 million. Okay. We have some growth rate. We have expense growth of 3% per year. And we have property management fee of 2.5% EGI. Okay, that's good. It says here that the net absorption will be 14 units per month. Income growth is going to be 2.5%. In this case, I'm just kind of like building it as I go, but like you would want to clean this up later. I mean, I'd probably have a section for inflation. I'd have a section for OpEx. I'm not doing that yet. But again, usually when I'm building it, I don't worry about cleaning it up. I clean it up at the end, right? Right now, I'm just trying to get the information out there because that's the goal. The market rent will be 4.25 per square foot. Oops, sorry, don't mean to do that. 2.5 per square foot per month. That's fine. Okay, and it looks like we have in-place rents and market rents, and those are different. Well, that's curious. Okay, so let's separate that out. So we're going to have income growth in place is 2.5, and then income growth market is going to be 3%. Now, normally you would have everything grow at the same rate, but maybe you have some units that are under some sort of rent control system. Maybe the in-place units are, in poor condition. It is a little bit weird to say that you have these two classes of units. It doesn't say anything about when your in-place become market. Like, do they roll to market in the future? They don't do any of that. And that's a simplification. In the real world, you might say, well, that's great that some of the units are growing at 2.5, but eventually they're going to be fixed up, right? Or eventually that rent control burns off or something like that. We're not dealing with any of that. Anyway, vacancy is 5%. As for the debt, here, let me make a section for the debt. We're going to have 6.5% per year. Looks like it's monthly calculations. We're going to have interest only for a year. So I'll just put in like IO period 1. And we're going to do amort schedule 30. And the term is going to be 10 years. I'm not going to worry about writing in the term. Because in this case, it's like a 10-year cash flow. The term is 10 years. Like, you're not refinancing it during it, right? So all that really matters is the amort and the interest. I mean, don't get me wrong. I can put in the term as 10, but like that's not going to drive anything. We have an LTV of 75%. We have a cap rate of 5%. We have a DSCR of 1.2. That's a min, right? That's a min DSCR. That's a make sure that the NOI doesn't get too low, that you can't pay the debt. Lenders generally want a spread there. We have a debt yield of 8%. That's going to come up later. Again, that's a min. That's going to help us with sizing the loan. I'll talk about that. We have here closing costs. Closing costs. And, I am organizing it a little bit. I'm not a total pig. I try to clean it up a little bit. The closing costs are going to be $400,000, and then there's going to be an origination fee of 0.75% and a mortgage brokerage fee of 1.0%. Oopsie, of 1.0%. And then when we sell it, I'm going to put in some sales assumptions. And I'm going to say that that's a cap rate of 4.25%. Okay, fine. That's what we're selling it at. We have closing costs, sale of 3.5% on the disposition price, and an exit fee of 0.25% on original loan amount. So so that's not tied to what the balance is at the end of year 10. That's saying if I lend you X amount of dollars, you're paying me some fee at the end. That's more common in a bridge loan. You probably wouldn't see that in a perm loan, a long-term perm loan, but nonetheless, that's what they put in the assignment. And the goal here is, it looks like we're going to have a few things. We're going to have a unlevered cash flow analysis. We're going to do some sort of equity multiple. We're going to do some sensitivity tables. And then finally, we're going to have some equity structure. Let me do the equity structure one. Equity structure. And this appears to say that there's going to be a GP and an LP, and they're going to put in 10% and 1 minus 90%. I often will build it this way, where if the GP is putting in X, the LP puts in the remainder, and I'll do it as 1 minus. That's flexible, so if someone comes along later and messes around with it and says, hey, this is 7%, then it automatically updates. You don't have to do that, but when building models, you want them to be flexible. You want it to be clear what's an input and what's a formula. There's going to be a preferred return, which is going to be 8%, and there's going to be a promote, which is going to be 30%. Now, one thing I like to do when I build these things is sometimes, I don't always have to do this, sometimes I will take like a little screenshot from this and put this right here next to the equity structure. This way, when later someone's like, gee, why did you do this? It's actually linked to something from the document. I like doing that. You know, often partnership structures can get kind of crazy. And when I'm like, oh, it's a 30% promote, people are like, well, you know, how does that work, or how does that flow, or what's the exact language? I like actually just snapshotting the document in question. And that's exactly what I did here. You know, I think this is a clarification. It's just a nice way to work. Anyway, that's all we really need to do here in this document. I'm also, just for my own humor value, well, I'm going to leave this document alone. I mean, I could snapshot what the assignment is, but I think that's enough in terms of inputs. This is a good list of starting inputs. You know, heaven knows it could always be worse. Like, the first rule of Excel modeling is always it can be worse, right? You can always add more things. But for now, that's sufficient. And just in interest of cleanliness, I'm going to call this inputs. And, well, you know, there's some inputs. Cool. That's a good start. Anyway, from here, we can build all the cool stuff. But we at least want to get those inputs in. Awesome. On to video 2, where we actually build some cash flows. Yeah, that's it. Okay, let's move on to other stuff. And since this video might make it also out to YouTube as a promotional piece for the course I'm teaching, you know, I'll just give the general like and subscribe shout out. And for those of you who have actually bought this as a paid product, obviously that shout out is kind of meaningless. But yeah, okay, on to video 2.